So today we're going to be talking clutch control drills. I'm going to break this down into 4 parts. Clutch slip, adding the balance and rear brake. Clutch pop, adding a wheelie. Clutch in for bringing the front end down, adding the rear brake. And then clutch pop after a wheelie. Now, I like the clutch engagement or friction zone to be nice and close. I got 2 pads on this. Most every bike that I get on somebody else's, it's way out here, which is going to lead to increased fatigue, cramping, less power, and less control. So in order to do that, we're going to turn this counterclockwise or turn the left, and then we're going to take this one in to remove the slack. Getting 2 finger pads around this clutch is my sweet spot. This is my preferred method. I would encourage you to give it a try as well. Now, to start off, this is super simple. We're just going to go ahead and rev up the bike and then let out the clutch, not only in first gear, but second gear and third gear. The next drill is definitely from IRC, Rich Larson, the tire guy. I love his stuff. Just rolling up a hill and then back again, using only the clutch and a little bit of throttle. So seated, this drill is pretty easy. And then we're going to try and hold onto that hill right up towards the top. The higher you go and the steeper the hill, the more challenging this gets. I'm just raising my feet so you can see that all the weight is on the bike. Now, in addition to that, you can also rev up the engine and stay in that friction slip spot. So regardless of how high you're revving the engine, you can still get accustomed to that friction zone and learn that sweet spot where you're just barely bringing the bike forward and then ideally stopping it or rolling back. Now this next one we're going to go ahead and do on one foot. So the same idea, rolling forward and backwards. We're going to go ahead and switch feet in this instance. And then we're going to go ahead and take a drill straight out of Rich Larson's book, which is applying the rear brake. So I've got the rear brake on right now. Then I'm trying to slip the clutch to hold it in the exact same position. So rear brake, then slip clutch. Now you notice the bike is still moving a little bit. I'm still working on getting this right. So sometimes there's a little bit of overlap where I'm slipping the clutch while still holding the rear brake and then taking my foot off the rear brake. Great drill. So now that we're getting better at slipping that clutch, we're going to go ahead and add the complexity of balance to this. This one's really hard, forward and backwards. Woo. I could only get 2 of these, and the higher and steeper the hill is, the more challenging this one gets. Next, we're going to add a little bit of static balance, so trying to hold the bike in this friction zone without rolling forward or backwards. Now, if you take the bike up a little bit higher, it gets even more challenging. Now this is all going to be done without any brakes, ideally just slipping that clutch and holding the bike in place, working the balance, and also having to concentrate mentally on slipping that clutch, staying right in that sweet spot. We're going to run through all the gears, including 4th gear on this one, which definitely makes for a challenge. Keeping your rear tire on the flat is definitely easier, but the higher you go on that hill increases the difficulty. The last clutch slip drill is going to be taking a play out of the Trials bicycle world. This is called a track stand. So if your wheel is tilted to the left, if you're falling to the left, you're just going to accelerate a little bit. And if you're falling to the right, you're just going to allow your bike to roll back a little bit. This one's tough. All right, we're going to move into clutch pops. So with both feet on the ground, just getting accustomed to where that friction point is, how high I can rev the bike, pop the clutch, and still keep it in control. Now you're noticing probably that my front wheel is coming up. And as soon as it comes up, I'm going to pull that clutch back in. That is a brain pattern we want to establish. So especially if I give it too much gas, if I'm popping that front tire up too high, quickly pulling that clutch back in is going to bring that front end back down, and that is your safety. So we're going to go ahead and do these clutch pops now rolling, and if I'm going slow, the clutch pop is more noticeable. So this time going a more medium speed, the clutch pop isn't nearly as drastic, and then going at a faster speed, popping that clutch is almost not noticeable. So now we're going to do the exact same thing, but in 2nd gear. So it's important to know as I rev up that bike and pop that clutch, what is going to happen. Now this time I'm in 3rd gear, and we're just running through all the gears to get a feel for when I pop the clutch, how much power is applied to that rear tire, and how much does the front end come up. In addition to that, we can go ahead and do some practice wheelies. You can try and get 3 of these inside of a 20-foot space. Now we're going to intentionally rev the engine before a little bit and then let out the clutch. This is different than a typical wheelie. I want you to listen specifically to the RPM. Now these next ones are some of my favorite because when you're doing a wheelie and you really get that front tire up, your brain goes into a fog and you forget what to do. So by putting my feet on the ground, I'm going to intentionally rev the bike up, pop the clutch, and then pull it back in right away. This way I'm creating that pattern in my brain where I'm learning to pop the clutch and then pull it back in for safety. That way I don't loop out. At this point you can begin slipping the clutch if needed to keep the front wheel up. So in this drill we're just learning to pop the front tire up and then bring it back down. Now if you're too short, you can try this to the side, although it's a lot harder to keep the bike balanced in the right place. Then working on a pivot turn where you're just rotating the bike around that planted foot can be a great way to get out of a jam in a trials event where you need to turn quickly. This next one might be one of my favorite because you're learning to pop the clutch, pull the clutch in, and then jump off for safety. So definitely want to practice that. Now here we're actually trying to slip the clutch, allow the bike to roll backwards a little bit, and then back in. And there's a sweet spot to the RPMs. What happens when you rev it up too high? It goes out, so quickly pull the clutch in. Now we're going to try and rev the engine just barely. All right, taking the bike for a walk, similar to walking the dog. This is a great way to practice that clutch slip. This will improve your wheelies like nothing else. I'm not kidding. Doing this up and down my driveway just one time and then going to practice my wheelies, tons better for sure. Even though pulling the clutch in will bring that front end down, we are going to go ahead and add in the rear brake. So this time just hopping behind the bike and then letting out the clutch, getting a little bit farther forward, clutch in, rear brake. We're working on establishing a pattern in the brain of clutch in, rear brake to save myself from looping out and falling down. So especially if you're giving it too much gas, this is actually good to practice. Too much gas, clutch in, rear brake. I'm safe, clutch in, rear brake. All right, so this next one's super applicable for trials, learning to do a small practical wheelie and accurately place the front tire right on an object. So we're gonna do some short wheelies and then some longer wheelies. The important thing is being able to put that front tire right where you want it. And you can bring the front tire down in a multiple of ways. You can stop giving it gas, you can pull the clutch in, you can hit the rear brake. In this instance, we are letting the clutch dictate the wheel coming down. So I'm pulling the clutch back in, but continuing to accelerate on the gas. This is where this type of jab zap comes into play. Continuing to give it RPM, but then pulling the clutch in to bring that front wheel down, and then popping the clutch right as the front wheel comes down, pop, and getting some lift. So this is a great drill to practice even on the flat ground. Now there is another way to do this type of maneuver, this jab zap, and that is with two distinct throttle blips. That type of jab zap is going to look a little bit more like this. So we're going to practice that now. The clutch is going to be fully engaged on the first blip to get the front tire up. Then I'm pulling in the clutch, revving it up for that second pop. This is Tommy T, second year Moto Trials, trying to bring you some practical tips on how to make you better at the clutch so that you can ride better. I appreciate you guys watching. Hopefully this has added value to you as a rider. If it has, consider subscribing, hit that like button, drop me a comment, let me know which one you like the best.